Cantor teams up with Tether, and Cantor is Howard Lutnick's firm, who is now Secretary of Commerce. And his company put together a deal with Tether, and we all know Tether, obviously the largest stablecoin in the world, and they just mint money hand over fist. I think it's probably per employee is probably the most profitable company on the planet.
Sure, easily.
And SoftBank, yeah, easily. And SoftBank for a $3.6 billion crypto venture, 21 Capital. That's going to go public through a SPAC deal. The venture will launch with over 42,000 Bitcoin. SoftBank will have a minority ownership. Tether, I think, has the majority ownership, if I read the filing correctly. And yeah, fascinating. There's another big player on the LBE, the leverage Bitcoin equity playground, to rival Saylor in strategy.
Absolutely. So I've said for a long time, or I've thought for a long time maybe, that really what Saylor needs to win is actually a competitor. And that may sound counterintuitive in some way. If you have a monopoly, why does having a competitor help you? But in Saylor's case, I think it's the best possible thing that could happen, because right now it's really just him. Sure, you have some small companies that have followed suit, but he's the only person buying billions and billions of dollars of Bitcoin a year. When only one person is doing it, it's like an interesting little quirky stock that has done really well, sure, but it's not a competitive landscape. Once you have two well-capitalized players with deep pockets that can access tap capital markets, fighting in public to compete, shoving billions and billions of dollars into Bitcoin, I guarantee you the market will look at this extremely differently. And there's rumors there's a third one coming that's quite large. So I think this really takes off. I think paradoxically, it makes it easier for Saylor to access money because someone else is doing it. And the interesting thing about this whole business model is it's win-win for him. If 21 decides to buy $50 billion of Bitcoin to try to catch up with him, guess what? It only increases the value of his treasury.
Yeah, I like that take as well. He, in fact, this is why he open sourced the whole playbook and has been talking about and encouraging companies to copy his plan. And since he started doing this, so it's been 4 years now that he's been doing this. So he wanted a big follower to come in and validate his idea to the rest of the market and start competing against him to accumulate Bitcoin. He's got a huge head start, and his accumulation may slow down as more and more of these companies enter the field, or even large US public corporations start stacking for their treasury, for instance. But he's so far ahead that strategy just cemented as a global player, a huge, massive player in the global economy for the coming centuries, probably, as long as Bitcoin is valued.
You just can't compete with him without making him more valuable.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is pretty fascinating, because I don't think there's really a good analogy for that in the rest of the corporate world, right? It's like whatever business you run, if you raised a bunch of money and you execute on your strategy, you can never say it's really a good thing for another company to raise a boatload of money and execute your exact strategy. Like maybe if it's just such a brand new industry, you're just happy that attention's being drawn to it. But at the end of the day, you will be directly competing with that entity for customers, for revenue, market share, all this stuff. And the speculative attack, which is at the end of the day, what these companies are pulling off, is tapping fiat denominated capital markets, debt and equity to acquire Bitcoin at the fastest, most efficient pace you can. That's what they're doing at the end of the day. That is not something that you would look and say, oh, because I'm doing it, therefore it's bad that someone copies me. If anything, it's easier to make the argument that it's good that someone copies you.
Yes.
And these companies still do have to be prudent. I should say that you have to have someone sharp at the helm here that has a corporate finance background, that creates the right instruments, ladders the maturities, make sure there's enough time for the debt to mature and for Bitcoin to appreciate in value. But I think at the end of the day, you have to remember that what do you need for both? Let's say 21 Capital is the latest entity to run the MicroStrategy playbook. Let's say a dozen more entities do it. ask yourself the question, what does it take for all the dozen entities to be successful? Assuming they run the strategy prudently, it takes Bitcoin to go up over a 4 to 5 year time horizon, right? As long as the answer to that question is Bitcoin is up on a 4 to 5 year time horizon, all of the entities running this strategy will be successful. I think it actually is that simple.
It is 100%. And we actually have an incredible parallel here to make this not speculative or like we're speculating. The answer is called the US real estate market. I'm very completely serious. What the US real estate market is a government subsidized investment scheme where you can borrow money cheaply to buy fixed supply assets. And as long as everybody does it, everybody wins. All the homeowners win. The people that don't own the homes don't win. But it is effectively one of the biggest. I think you have to say that the real estate market is one of the biggest wealth transfers from the government to people that exists in America, right? Because they effectively subsidize cheap loans and people get to buy assets. And so obviously not everybody owns a home and not everyone bought a home very early on and not everyone benefited from that sort of structure. But I think it's a very comparable analog where everybody that did take on leverage to buy real estate over a 30-year time horizon won. Literally everybody. You were better to do it than to not do it in every conceivable stance, as long as you could not sell. And I think that's a comparable thing with Bitcoin here in these companies. Every company that takes on relatively cheap debt relative to the Bitcoin to buy Bitcoin, who can hold that Bitcoin for X years and not sell it, will win.
I like it. And yeah, if we keep running with that. So yeah, you did find the analogy that I was looking for and saying maybe it doesn't exist, but you're right. Real estate is an appropriate analogy here. I guess we could say, if you're the real estate acquirer and someone else copies you, is it 100% good for you? Maybe it's mostly good for you. The way that it might not be good for you is that you're now competing with someone to acquire the real estate. So maybe the fact that MicroStrategy is not the only one doing this, maybe they won't be able to acquire as much Bitcoin, because if 21 Capital does this and a dozen other companies do this, the pace of MicroStrategy's Bitcoin adoption will likely slow because the price is just going to go up. The same way if another real estate acquirer is acquiring real estate alongside you, maybe they're bidding up the prices, you can't acquire as much real estate. But it's still a validation of what you're doing. And if you already hold a bunch of real estate, they're bidding up the price of the asset that you already hold.
Yeah.
It's mostly good, not 100% good, but it's like mostly good.
It's almost like taking dilution in a startup from startup equity as you're raising money, right? You're going to end up with you have the same number of shares, you have a smaller percentage of the pie. And the point is, as you're taking on investors and you're willing to take dilution, is that all of those shares increase in value. And so if Saylor's doing this and he's saying, join me, run my playbook, please. He's saying, we can just lift all boats by making Bitcoin more valuable. And he's set. Someone in the chat said no one will be able to take him out. I don't think there's any corporation that could stack more Bitcoin than Saylor is at this point. I think now it's nation states that could possibly take him out. Like the US could do it. If the US had the will to do it, then we could buy 1 million Bitcoin right now. More than that. But that's where Saylor is. Saylor's gone from first mover advantage for 4 years, trying to get people to do this thing and follow him. And he's just run up the score so high that there's no other company that can do it. But at the same time, the rate of accumulation will go down undoubtedly, but the value of his company is just going to keep going up and up and up. And that's in real terms. So whatever he wants to do with it, I think he's just going to keep holding it and running this playbook. He'd be able to deploy that capital in many other ways if he wanted to. And 20, 30, 40 years from now, like biggest company on the planet.
And one other way that the real estate analogy I think is really good is that people can't just ape into borrowing money to buy real estate. Like you still can get burned, right? And I think the financial crisis of 2008 was an example of this. If people start doing really stupid things, short-term loans, adjustable rate mortgages, buying in at the peak of the peak, it's not like you can just close your eyes and do anything to borrow and buy real estate and you'll be fine. There's points in time where it might not work out well for you. Or if you just do it really stupidly, it might not work out well for you. But all the companies I've seen so far that are serious about this leveraged Bitcoin equity, Bitcoin treasury strategy, Bitcoin acquisition vehicle, whatever you want to call it, they understand that they have to be prudent in doing this. They're not just like aping in and needing Bitcoin to rise like 3 months later. We might see that in a few years' time, people just being really stupid about it, but I don't think we've seen that yet.
And I think the biggest thing is what you just talked about, people aping in. That's what most of what I would say traditional finance that doesn't get Bitcoin thinks Saylor has been doing. Because I saw another round of memes or these threads of recreating Saylor and now having with Mallers and 21 Capital, like how dumb this all is. And it's interesting that someone can still make the claims that they make on Saylor and MicroStrategy and then not just be like, hey, the proof is in the pudding. Like we don't have to get super technical. You take company, you add Bitcoin, this is the result. You have no leg to stand on. And so, yes, there's going to be people that are going to take that and say, shoot, we should do that too. It's not typically, and I know this show and folks on here, we've talked about this a lot of times. It's not going to be Google doing it. And I saw someone in the chat talking about Google shouldn't do their buyback. They should go buy Bitcoin. Eventually they will, but they don't need to yet. Maybe they aren't there yet. And there's going to be those companies that over time will get there, but they don't have to move first to do that because they have so much capital and they are successful in their own right in the current system, where it's going to be the companies that are on the outskirts and or those that are creative enough to attack it doing something different.
Yeah, absolutely.
These tech companies might be like a Xerox or Blockbuster kind of situation because they're not acting fast enough to a new market reality, right? And so these companies that are building on a Bitcoin standard are going to be positioned to become more powerful than they are if they don't adopt some kind of Bitcoin strategy like soon, right?
Yeah.
And the longer they wait, the further they're going to be left behind.
Especially the tech companies. I'm not an expert in Google's business model, but from everything I can tell, they have not captured the opportunity with AI as well as some others have. And it seems like they've been losing a good amount of share to the people who have. So if you don't adopt for the latest technology and you miss the boat on the Bitcoin strategy, then yeah, maybe you risk going the route of Xerox, like you said, Brady.
Those were big companies, very big companies that no one thought were ever unassailable. But market realities change quickly. And if you don't follow along and move quickly, then even the biggest corporations can tumble.
Absolutely. That's what history shows, period.
Yep.